She thought she had buried her son, and with him, every secret he could have possibly kept. For 3 years, Eleanor Whitmore, one of the richest and most powerful women in the country, lived with the crushing silence of grief. Her son was gone. Her legacy shattered, and the only thing she had left was a marble headstone and unanswered questions. But on a quiet morning, at a grave she believed only she ever visited, she found someone else kneeling beside it. A woman she didn't know. A child who shouldn't have been there. And when the woman opened her mouth and the little boy looked up, Eleanor's world collapsed all over again. Because the truth she had buried wasn't 6 feet under. It was standing right in front of her. Crying, the morning fog hadn't lifted when Eleanor Whitmore's car pulled into the private section of Evergreen Cemetery. Her driver didn't speak. He never did on the 14th. The only sound came from the faint hum of the engine and the soft rustle of wind brushing against the sycamore trees. Eleanor, draped in black cashmere and still wearing the same diamond brooch Daniel had gifted her on her last birthday together, stepped out without a word. Her heels sank slightly into the damp grass. The roses in her hand trembled not from the cold, but from something else she could never name. She hated this day, and yet she clung to it. Every 14th she came. Every 14th she wept. And every 14th she left feeling emptier than before. But this time, something wasn't right. As she approached the marble headstone, the one that bore the name Daniel James Whitmore, beloved son, 1989 to 2022, she slowed. Her heart skipped. Her breath caught. Someone was already there. It wasn't a mourner from another plot. It wasn't the groundskeeper. It was a young woman, early 30s, maybe younger. Her uniform was unmistakable, a plain, faded waitress apron still dusted with flour and grease stains. Her curly hair was tied back in a rushed ponytail, and her trembling hand was resting on the headstone. Beside her stood a little boy. Eleanor blinked. Her first instinct was confusion. Her second was suspicion. No one came here but her. No one had permission to be near this grave. And yet the woman didn't look like a trespasser. She looked heartbroken. The boy was maybe 4. Curly dark hair. Wide brown eyes glistening with tears. His tiny fingers gripped a threadbare teddy bear, its ear half chewed, its fur matted. He wasn't just there. He belonged there. The way he knelt, the way he touched the grave, the way he whispered to it like he knew who was buried beneath. Eleanor felt her throat tighten. Something inside her trembled. She was just about to ask the woman who she was, why she was here when she heard it. "Say goodbye to Daddy," the woman said softly to the child. Time stopped. Eleanor stumbled forward, her voice shaking. "What did you just say?" The woman turned, startled. Her eyes met Eleanor's sharp, wide, wounded. The boy clutched her leg instinctively. For a moment, there was only silence between them, thick and suffocating. The woman opened her mouth, but couldn't speak. The child, however, looked up at Eleanor. And in that moment, she felt the earth shift beneath her feet. Those eyes. She had seen those eyes before. Every night in framed photos. Every time she looked in the mirror. Every time she closed her own eyes and remembered the face she had loved more than life itself, her son. The boy had Daniel's eyes. "No," Eleanor whispered, stepping back. "That's not possible. Daniel never. He would have told me." "He wouldn't." "No." The woman's lips quivered. Her voice was hoarse when she finally spoke. "He tried, ma'am. He really did. But you wouldn't let him." Eleanor's breath left her body like a punch to the chest. "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice cracking. The woman glanced down at the boy, then back up. "Your son, Daniel. He was in love with me. And this," she gently nudged the boy forward. "This is Elijah, your grandson." Eleanor's knees buckled. The world spun. No, this couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now, not like this. Everything inside her screamed denial, but her eyes betrayed her heart. The boy looked just like Daniel at that age. The same chin, the same ears, the same sadness. When they cried. And yet, Eleanor couldn't remember a single time she'd asked her son if he was happy, if he was in love, if he had someone. She had been too busy planning his future, managing his legacy, building a dynasty around the family name. She thought she knew everything about her son, but clearly she hadn't known him at all. The woman's voice broke the silence again. He wanted to tell you. We even planned to come see you together. But then the accident happened. Eleanor covered her mouth as a sob escaped. She remembered that night too well. The phone call, the flashing lights, the shattered car, the sealed casket, the words instant death, and now a child, a life, a future that never had a chance. I didn't come for money, the woman continued. Gently, I came to let him meet his father, even if it's just a name on a stone. He asks about him every day. The child looked up again, eyes wide and innocent. Are you Grandma? He asked, almost shyly. And in that moment, Eleanor collapsed to her knees, roses falling from her hands, heartbreaking for a second time, but this time for what might have been. She reached out, touched the child's hand. It was warm, real, alive. Yes, she whispered through tears. Yes, sweetheart. I think I am. The cemetery was silent, except for the occasional rustling of wind and the distant chirping of bird sounds, far too gentle for a moment so heavy. Eleanor remained on her knees, stunned, clutching the tiny hand of the boy who had just called. Her grandma. Her mind was a blur of images, Daniel as a child, his laughter echoing through their estate halls, his rebellious teenage years, the late-night arguments, and the distance that grew like ivy between them. She'd always thought she was doing what was best, guiding him, protecting him, shaping him into the heir she needed him to be. But now she realized she may have been the very reason he had hidden the most important parts of his life. She looked up at the young woman, the waitress whose name she still didn't know, whose life had clearly been entangled with her son's in ways Eleanor had never imagined. What's your name? Eleanor asked softly. The woman hesitated, then said, Amara. Eleanor repeated it under her breath. Amara. The name felt foreign and familiar all at once. How long were you two? Eleanor's voice faltered. Almost 5 years. Amara said gently, We met when he came into the diner. I didn't know who he was at first. He just said his name was Daniel. He was kind, he listened, he made me laugh. He wasn't the billionaire's son when he was with me. He was just a man trying to be free. Eleanor's chest tightened. She couldn't remember the last time Daniel had laughed freely around her. Amara continued, her voice steadier now, though grief still clung to her every word. We lived in a small apartment downtown. It wasn't much, but it was ours. He loved making pancakes on Sundays, playing his guitar, and talking to the baby even before Elijah was born. He wanted to tell you, but he was scared. Scared? Eleanor blinked, confused. Amara nodded. He said you wouldn't accept me, that he was already disappointing you with the way he lived, that you'd never allow your grandson to grow up in a world that didn't fit your name, your image. Eleanor felt like she couldn't breathe. She had always been proud of her strength, her empire, the walls she had built to protect her family legacy. But she never realized those same walls had locked her son out, had made him feel unwanted in his truest form. Tears spilled freely now. I didn't know, I thought he was just being distant, that he was ungrateful. Amara gave a small, sad smile. He wasn't, he loved you, but he didn't know how to make you see him. Eleanor turned to Elijah, who had now wandered closer to the grave, placing the teddy bear gently at the foot of the headstone. I miss you, Daddy, the boy whispered, pressing his small hand against the cold marble. A sob caught in Eleanor's throat. He was so small, so innocent, and yet burdened by the absence of a man he'd never get to truly know. Eleanor's hands shook as she placed a trembling palm on the boy's back. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Amara knelt beside her. "He would have wanted you to know him. Elijah's smart. He loves books just like Daniel. He hates broccoli. He sleeps with his socks on. He says sorry too much, and he hums in his sleep. When he's dreaming, he's so much like him it hurts." Eleanor turned to Amara now, fully, searching her face for bitterness, for blame, but found none. "You must hate me." Amara looked away. "I did, for a long time. But grief does strange things. It makes you remember the good just as fiercely as the bad. And Daniel always believed in forgiveness. He said one day you'd meet Elijah and know it was meant to be." Eleanor's shoulders crumbled under the weight of years of silence, power, pride, and regret. She had lost a son, and now stood on the edge of losing a grandson she never knew she had. "I don't know how to fix any of this," she whispered, almost broken. "You don't have to fix everything," Amara replied. "But maybe you can start by not." Walking away, Eleanor looked at Elijah again. He was tracing the letters on the gravestone with his tiny finger, mouthing each one. He looked up and smiled a smile that mirrored Daniel's so perfectly, it brought fresh tears to Eleanor's eyes. She nodded, slowly rising from the ground. She dusted the soil from her coat and took a deep breath. "Come home with me," she said to Amara. "Both of you." Amara hesitated. "Eleanor, I didn't come here to—" "I know," she interrupted. "But I need to know him. I need to know my son. Through you. Through Elijah. If you'll let me." There was a long silence. Then Amara nodded softly. Cautiously, "I'll come," she said. "But only if this is about love, not image, not legacy." Eleanor's voice cracked as she replied, "It's all I have left." As they walked back to the car, Amara holding Elijah's hand, Eleanor walking beside them, 3 lives that had been shattered in different ways began, for the first time, to lean toward healing. And though the past could never be undone, perhaps, just perhaps, the future had a chance to bloom again. The black Bentley cruised through the iron gates of the Whitmore estate, its wheels crunching over the pristine gravel like thunder in a chapel. The sprawling mansion stood before them, tall and cold like a monument to power. Marble columns stretched into the sky. Every window gleamed. Every corner screamed control. Inside, everything was quiet, too quiet. Eleanor led the way, her expression unreadable, while Amara followed behind, carrying Elijah in her arms. The boy's wide eyes scanned the crystal chandeliers, the oil paintings, the distant echo of footsteps on polished floors. To him, this place was another world. A castle, but without the laughter, without the warmth. They stepped into the grand sitting room where portraits of ancestors hung like watchful ghosts. At the center of the wall was a painting of Daniel in his early 20s. His mother had commissioned it for his graduation. He looked formal, almost royal in the image, dressed in a tailored navy suit. But his eyes, even in paint, they looked tired, trapped. Amara stopped in front of it and whispered, "He never liked that painting. Said it wasn't really him." Eleanor didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on the boy again, Elijah, who now stood beneath his father's portrait. So small, and yet the gravity of what he represented was enormous. The last blood of the Whitmore name. Before anyone could speak, a voice pierced the silence. "Mother? Why didn't you tell me you were bringing guests?" It was Gregory Whitmore, Eleanor's late husband's brother and longtime advisor. A thin man with silver hair, tailored suits, and a voice that always sounded like a closing door. He looked at Amara, then at Elijah. His brow furrowed. Eleanor stood taller. "They're not guests. This is Amara. And this," she placed her hand gently on the boy's shoulder, "is Daniel's son, my grandson." The silence that followed was thick and immediate. Gregory's face drained of color. "I beg your pardon?" Amara clutched Elijah tighter. "I said," Eleanor repeated, voice firmer now, "this is Daniel's child. He has a right to be here." Gregory took a step forward, lowering his voice, but the venom was unmistakable. "Eleanor, do you have any idea what you're doing? We have lawyers, shareholders, foundations. Bringing in her and a child without proof. Do you know what this looks like?" Eleanor's voice turned cold. "It looks like the truth. Something this family has avoided for far too long." Gregory scoffed, then turned to Amara. "And what's your story, miss? You show up after 3 years with a child and a sob story. And we're just supposed to believe it?" Amara's face didn't flinch. "I didn't come for your approval. I came because Elijah deserves to know who his father was. And he deserves the dignity of being acknowledged." Gregory's eyes narrowed. "Dignity? Do you know how many people would kill to tarnish the Whitmore name? A waitress, you walking into this house with a child, thinking you belong?" Eleanor's voice cracked like thunder. "That's enough, Gregory." The room froze. She stepped between them, her eyes burning. "I let you run the family business. I let you advise me, control me, manipulate everything after Daniel died, because I thought I couldn't think. But not anymore. That little boy is my blood, my future. And he will not be hidden, dismissed, or treated like a stain on this family." Gregory clenched his jaw. "What about the board? The trust? The media?" Eleanor turned to him slowly. "Let them come. Let them ask questions. Because for once in my life, I'm not hiding anything." Gregory looked at her, truly looked, and realized she wasn't bluffing. He exhaled sharply. "Fine, then you'll need a paternity test. Before anything else happens." Amara nodded. "We'll do it." Gregory gave a tight smile. "Good, because if the results don't match, they will," Eleanor snapped. "Because I know my son, and I see him in that boy." With that, she took Elijah's hand. "Come, sweetheart, let me show you the garden. Your daddy used to chase butterflies there when he was your age." Elijah looked up and smiled. "Daddy liked butterflies too?" Eleanor felt tears rising again. "Yes, baby, he did." As they walked away, Amara followed, leaving Gregory standing alone in a room full of ancestors whose pride now seemed like chains. Outside, the garden was just as Eleanor remembered, untouched, still blooming with the same blue irises Daniel had once planted as a child. Elijah ran ahead, laughing, his voice echoing through the hedges. It was the first time laughter had been heard in that garden in years. Amara stepped beside her. "He's happy," she whispered. Eleanor nodded slowly. "He's home." But deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning, because love might have brought them together. But truth was about to test them all. The Whitmore estate had seen its fair share of silence, but the silence now felt different, charged. Every hallway seemed to whisper. Every portrait seemed to watch. The DNA test had been completed 3 days ago, and now the envelope sat unopened on Eleanor's desk. She stared at it, her fingers trembling slightly. For someone who had commanded boardrooms, signed billion-dollar contracts, and silenced governments with a single phone call, this single piece of paper had brought her to her knees. Amara stood across from her, holding Elijah in her arms. The boy had fallen asleep, cheek pressed to her shoulder, breath slow and steady. He looked peaceful, unaware that the fate of his identity, his name, his legacy rested on something as fragile as a document. "Open it," Amara said softly. Eleanor hesitated, then picked up the envelope. She slid her nail beneath the seal and unfolded the paper. Her eyes scanned the results. Her heart stopped. 99.99% probability. Daniel James Whitmore, biological father. Eleanor's hand covered her mouth. The tears came slowly, then all at once. Amara watched her quietly. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She just waited. Eleanor looked up, And in that moment, there was no more doubt, no more hesitation. "He's my grandson," she whispered. "He really is." Amara nodded. "He always was." But just as the weight of truth settled, the sound of a phone shattered the stillness. "Eleanor's personal line," she answered, and Gregory's voice exploded through the speaker. "Turn on the news, now." Confused, Eleanor reached for the remote and turned on the massive screen mounted on the far wall. A breaking news segment filled the room. A shocking turn in the Whitmore legacy, a woman claiming to be the mother of Daniel Whitmore's child has come forward. Sources confirm a DNA test is underway. If true, the child could inherit billions, but the question remains to why? Did Eleanor Whitmore keep this a secret for so long? A parade of photos followed images of Amara outside the cemetery. A blurry shot of Eleanor holding the child's hand, drone footage over the estate. Panic slammed into her chest like a freight train. "No." Eleanor whispered. Gregory was still on the phone. "It's out, Eleanor. Every paper, every news site. They're painting you like a monster, like you buried your son and his child. The foundation board is furious. The trustees are calling for an emergency meeting. If you don't act, you'll lose everything." Eleanor's face paled. "I didn't leak this. I swear I didn't." Gregory's tone turned sharp. "Then who did?" They all looked at each other until Amara's face suddenly froze. I told no one. But I did get a phone call too. Nights ago, someone asking about Daniel. They said they were a friend of his. I didn't think." She trailed off, horrified. Gregory growled. "They baited you. You gave them the thread and they pulled the whole thing apart." Eleanor's hands clenched. Her empire, her privacy, her family's future, it was all unraveling. And worst of all, Elijah's face was now on national television. "Get him out of here," Gregory snapped. "Now, before this turns into a circus." Amara's arms tightened around Elijah. "You want me to hide again?" "I want to protect the child," he said, but the contempt in his tone was clear. Eleanor stood suddenly. "Enough!" Her voice boomed across the marble floor. "I won't hide him, not anymore. If the world wants to see who Daniel's real legacy is, let them. I won't bury my grandson in silence like I buried my son." Gregory's jaw tightened. "Then you've made your choice." He hung up. The room fell still again, but the storm outside had only begun. That evening, Eleanor stood in the garden while the wind picked up and clouds rolled across the sky. Amara approached slowly, Elijah trailing behind her with a toy plane in his hand. "I'm sorry," Amara whispered. "I never meant for this to happen." Eleanor looked out at the horizon. "Neither did I, but sometimes the truth has its own way of getting out." Elijah ran up to Eleanor and tugged on her coat. "Grandma," he said sweetly, "do you think Daddy can see me?" Eleanor kneeled slowly, pulling him into a gentle hug. "I think," she said through a tearful smile, "he's been waiting for this moment. For a very long time." Amara looked away, swallowing the lump in her throat. Just then, the old butler Charles approached cautiously. "Ma'am, you have another visitor." Eleanor turned, confused. "Who?" Charles hesitated. "A woman. She says she knew Daniel. Says she has something you need to see." Amara's eyes darkened. "What woman?" Charles looked down. "She said her name is Naomi." Eleanor's heart froze. That name came from a place long buried. A chapter Daniel never talked about again after his first year of college. Eleanor stood. "Bring her in." And as Naomi stepped through the glass doors of the Whitmore garden, holding a small sealed letter in her hand, Eleanor had the sudden sinking feeling that Daniel's story wasn't finished. Not yet. Naomi stood at the edge of the Whitmore garden, soaked from the light rain, her hand clutched around a small, weathered envelope. Her eyes, dark and serious, swept across the garden before landing on Eleanor. It had been almost 10 years, but Eleanor recognized her instantly. Naomi Hudson, Daniel's college girlfriend. The girl she had once publicly called a distraction. The girl Eleanor paid discreetly to stay away. And now here she was, standing in Eleanor's home, holding something that made her chest tighten before a single word was spoken. Amara stiffened beside Eleanor, clearly wary. Elijah, sensing the tension, stayed close to his mother, gripping her hand tightly. Naomi's voice was quiet but steady. "I'm not here to fight. I don't want anything. But Daniel gave me something a few months before he died. He made me promise to deliver it if anything ever happened to him." Eleanor's heart pounded. "Why you?" Naomi looked at her. "Evenly, because he didn't trust anyone else. And because, even though we hadn't been together in years, I was still the only one he ever told everything to." Amara glanced at Eleanor, then back at Naomi. The words hung heavy in the air. Naomi stepped forward and held out the envelope. "I didn't want to come, but when I saw the news, I knew it was time." Eleanor took the envelope with trembling fingers. The paper was soft, slightly yellowed, as if it had been handled many times. Her name was written on the front, Mom and Daniel's. Familiar, looping script. She sat down slowly on the garden bench, hands shaking as she opened it. And began to read. "Mom, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. And I hate that. I hate that I never got to say these words to your face. But I've spent my whole life trying to earn your love in ways I now realize were never necessary. You loved me the only way you knew how, through expectation. But I needed more. I needed you to see me, not the heir, not the legacy, not the next Whitmore name carved into marble. Just me, Daniel, your son, the boy who loved music, who cried when Dad died, who fell in love with a waitress in a backstreet diner and didn't care what people thought. Amara, she's real. She's strong, kind, and far braver than I ever was. She gave me a home when I didn't feel like I had one anywhere else. And Elijah, he's everything. He laughs like you when something surprises him. He looks like me, but he feels like you. Deep, quiet, fierce. I wish you could have seen him sooner. But I didn't tell you. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was scared. Scared that you'd look at him and see a mistake instead of a miracle. And I couldn't bear to see you look at me that way again. Naomi once told me that we don't choose our parents, but we do choose whether to forgive them. So I'm choosing to forgive you. I hope one day you'll forgive me too for not trusting you, for leaving you with this pain. But most of all, I hope you choose Elijah, because he'll need someone brave, and he'll need someone who can love him loudly, not just from a distance. He deserves that. He deserves you. Love always. Daniel. By the end, Eleanor's hands were covering her mouth. Her eyes were brimming with tears she couldn't hold back. Her chest ached, not just from grief, but from the weight of all the years lost to silence. "I never knew he wrote this," she whispered. Naomi sat beside her gently. "He didn't want to resent you, Eleanor. He wanted you to heal. All of you." Amara stayed quiet for a long time. Then she slowly stepped forward. "Do you believe now that I never wanted to steal him from you?" Eleanor looked up, eyes raw and open. "Yes," she said, "I believe you. And I'm sorry for everything." Then she reached out, hesitant but genuine, and took Amara's hand in hers. The first gesture of unity since the day they met. Naomi stood and nodded. "My part's done. Take care of each other." She turned to leave, her figure disappearing into the misty rain like a messenger, sent only for a moment. And nothing more. Elijah climbed up onto the bench and crawled into Eleanor's lap. "Why are you crying, Grandma?" Eleanor smiled through the tears. "Because I miss your daddy, but I feel him right here. In you." The boy leaned his head on her chest and whispered, "I miss him too." And in that fragile moment, the grief between them became a bridge, not a wall. 3 days had passed since Eleanor read Daniel's letter. and the once quiet estate was now drowning in noise. Media vans parked beyond the gates, reporters shouting through intercoms, tabloids publishing rumors with every breakfast across the country. But inside the Whitmore mansion, the real war was brewing behind closed doors. Eleanor sat at the head of the long oak conference table, flanked by two senior attorneys and Gregory, whose presence had shifted from concerned uncle to full-blown corporate general. His suit was crisp, his tone cutting. "This child," Gregory said, slapping a folder onto the table, "poses a threat to the structure we've spent decades maintaining." Eleanor narrowed her eyes. "That child is my grandson." Gregory didn't flinch. "Emotion doesn't negate law. Daniel left no official record of paternity, no will acknowledging the boy. If you name Elijah as heir, you open the door to litigation, scandal, and instability across all our holdings." One of the attorneys cleared his throat gently. "Mrs. Whitmore, if I may, Mr. Gregory is technically correct. According to the Whitmore Legacy Clause drafted in 1999, no descendant can inherit or bear the Whitmore name without official bloodline verification and board approval. The board may reject Elijah based on lineage status alone." Eleanor folded her hands, expression tight. "We have bloodline verification. A DNA test confirms Elijah is Daniel's son." Gregory leaned in. "But not Daniel's acknowledged son. There's a difference. And trust me, Eleanor, if you make this public, the vultures will circle. Competitors, ex-spouses of shareholders, even government tax authorities. They'll pick the Whitmore empire apart piece by piece." For a long moment, silence settled over the room like fog. Then Eleanor stood slowly, her voice calm but heavy. "Tell me something, Gregory. If Daniel had lived and walked through that door with Amara and Elijah, would you have told him to walk away from his child?" Gregory stiffened. "That's not the point." "It is," she snapped, her voice suddenly sharp. "Because you speak of legacies and clauses in structure like they're more important than the blood that built this place. But I've read Daniel's letter. I saw his heart in that child's eyes. And I won't let this empire stand if it means standing on their exclusion." Gregory's jaw locked. "Then you leave the board no choice." "Then let them choose," Eleanor said, turning away. "But make sure they know if they push Elijah out, they push me out too. And without me, they'll lose the very name that built this house." The attorneys exchanged tense glances. Gregory's expression cracked just slightly. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and bathed the garden in gold, Eleanor found Amara and Elijah sitting by the fountain. The boy was trying to catch fireflies, laughing softly as they slipped through his fingers. Amara stood when she saw Eleanor approach. "How did it go?" Eleanor sighed, her features softening. "They're afraid of him, of you, of what he represents." Amara looked down. "And you?" Eleanor reached into her coat and pulled out a small velvet box. She knelt beside Elijah and opened it. Inside was Daniel's old signet ring, heavy, gold, etched with the Whitmore crest. "This belonged to your daddy," Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. "He wore it with pride. And now, if you'll let me, I want you to have it." Elijah looked up at her, blinking. "Even if I'm little?" Eleanor smiled. "Especially because you are." She slid the ring onto a chain and placed it gently around his neck. The boy beamed, fingers clutching it as if it were a treasure. Amara watched in silence, tears glistening in her eyes. As the wind rustled through the trees and the last light of day settled over the estate, Eleanor sat down beside them. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about legacy or reputation or control. She was thinking about Daniel and the boy who would carry his name, not through power or wealth, but through love.